Welcome back, everyone. Pastor Howie Maxon here as we continue our read through of the book of Revelation, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave to his servants, in particular the Apostle John, and gave as a letter of encouragement to the 7 churches in Asia Minor in somewhere around 70 AD, perhaps very soon before or very soon after, or maybe in the very year. At least that's what I've come to believe. And we're coming to the end. We're about halfway through chapter 18. So there are 4 sections in chapter 18. It's a long chapter, and we've already seen 3 of those sections, and 2 of them, and we come to the third one today, which is in verses 9 through 20, and entitled or described as Threefold Woe over Babylon's Fall. Now, I will gladly acknowledge that there are all kinds of different interpretations of this, in particular, interpretations of what Babylon means. There are people that reflect that this is the Roman Empire, or secondly, some reflect that it is the influence of the Roman Empire over the modern Western world. But there are others who see this as the fall of Jerusalem, which Jesus predicted, and which happened in 70 AD. That's the viewpoint that I have come to take, that this has to have meaning for the people that this letter was originally sent to. And it is filled with references that go back to the Old Testament and references that we have in the New Testament about the predicted fall of Jerusalem within this generation that Jesus spoke these words in, which are recorded for us in Matthew 24, 25, and in a couple other places. And that this is a fulfillment of those predictions. A generation, biblically speaking, was 40 years long. The generation of the Israelites in the desert, 40 years in the desert. The generations of some of the kings were described in the Bible as 40 years long. And so we have Jesus speaking about, in this generation, all these things will come to pass. And interestingly enough, he spoke those words in 30 AD during Passion Week before he was crucified. And in 70 AD, not one stone was left upon another in the temple, and the city was desolated. And the Old Testament covenant was, in a sense, made obsolete. It was desolate. Actually, the Old Covenant became obsolete as soon as Jesus fulfilled the Old Covenant, being the ultimate sacrifice for the sins of God's people, and not only for us, but for the whole world in his atonement. And so we come to this threefold woe over Babylon's fall, and I see it as Babylon being represented, or being the representation, the word Babylon, representation of, and in a kind of, in a sense, derogatory name for Jerusalem, because Jerusalem had become a city that was the capital of the Old Testament people of Israel rejecting their Messiah, as well as a capital of religion, the Old Testament religion in particular, but a capital city of religion compromising with the evil Roman Empire. So here's what we see. Here's what John saw and what John heard. Threefold woe over Babylon's fall. When the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her. Terrified at her torment, they will stand far off and cry, "Woe! Woe to you, great city, you mighty city of Babylon! In 1 hour your doom has come. So the actual breaking of the walls, breaking of the siege, and destruction of Jerusalem happened rapidly. And Josephus records how rapidly and how violently, when the Roman armies under Titus broke through, that this was accomplished, and the city was set on fire, and that the regions all around saw the smoke of the burning and knew that the city was doomed. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Cargoes of gold, silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet cloth, every sort of citron wood, and articles of every kind made of ivory, costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble. Cargoes of cinnamon and spice, of incense, myrrh, and frankincense, of wine and olive oil, of fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and carriages, and human beings sold as slaves. Jerusalem was one of the great marketplaces in the world in the first century. It had ports, it had roads, it had lots of commerce, people coming from all kinds of nations, trading goods. It is even traditionally believed that the man named Joseph of Arimathea, who tended to Jesus after his crucifixion, it's believed traditionally that he was a tin seller, a merchant of tin, and that he may have had business as far away in the west as Great Britain, which had the Isles of Great Britain had great veins of tin that were mined and sold in the marketplace. So Jerusalem was known to be a city of commerce, not just as it's depicted so often in movies and television shows about being just almost like a rural city with the main thing being the temple. The temple was there, yes, but it was a place of great commerce. It was valuable, not just to the Jews who lived there. It was valuable not just to the Christians who lived there. It was valuable to the Roman Empire. And it was a place that the Roman Empire wanted to preserve. But for the civil war that took place, Jews fighting against Jews over radical religious opinions and ideas, that the Romans had to come in and stop the fighting, but it just went too far. And it was destroyed, and it was burned. And Josephus witnessed this and talks about the great destruction and the fire and the desolation that followed. Verse 14, we go on, and they will say, this is still under the first of the three woes here in chapter 18, they will say, the fruit you longed for is gone from you. All your luxury and splendor have vanished, never to be recovered. The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her will stand far off, terrified at her torment. They will weep and mourn and cry out. Here's the second woe. Woe, woe to you, great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. In 1 hour, such great wealth has been brought to ruin. The destruction was complete. The destruction of wealth, the destruction of prosperity, the destruction of all the reputed glory of the city of Jerusalem. And it was brought about as a result of a civil war. So then, in 1 hour, such great wealth has been brought to ruin. And verse 17 continues, every sea captain and all who travel by ship, the sailors and all who earn their living from the sea will stand far off. Jerusalem was landlocked, but it had a major port city, and that was Ptolemais. And so it wasn't far from Jerusalem. It was on the seacoast of the Mediterranean Sea. And so a lot of over-the-water merchants and trading took place, and their wares were sold and traded in the city of Jerusalem. When they see the smoke of her burning, they will exclaim, "Was there ever a city like this great city?" They will throw dust on their heads, and with weeping and mourning cry out, third woe, "Woe, woe to you, great city, where all who had ships on the sea became rich through her wealth. In 1 hour she has been brought to ruin." Three woes in this section. But the last verse stands in glorious contrast to what we see in all of the other verses in this section. Remember, this was given by Christ to John to be given to his people who were suffering persecution. Yes, at the hands of Nero, but also the church had suffered persecution for the first 30 or 40 years of its existence from unbelieving Jews in Judaism. So here is, in contrast to three woes, verse 20. "Rejoice over her, you heavens. Rejoice, you people of God. Rejoice, apostles and prophets, for God has judged her with the judgment she imposed on you." Listen to the words that Jesus spoke at the end of Matthew 23, before his disciples commented about the glorious buildings of the temple in Jerusalem, and he then predicted this destruction that happened in 70 AD. Jesus said, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and those who are sent to you, how often I would have gathered you as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you would not. Therefore, I leave you desolated. Rejoice over her, you heavens. Rejoice, you people of God. Rejoice, apostles and prophets." All these people who had been persecuted by unbelieving Judaism, rejoice, for God has judged her as God the Son had said would happen, with the judgment she imposed on you. Well, that's what I have for you today. You may have different opinions about these sections, and that's okay. But I share with you what I have come to believe that Revelation is communicating to the people in the first century. And what we can learn, therefore, from it is not how to look for signs of the impending coming of Christ. That impending coming is every moment of every day. We are to watch and be alert to the coming of Christ. But what we do see is persecution, trials, tribulations, all kinds of things that were happening to believers in the first century when this letter was first delivered to them still happens today. Where countries have still intertwined religion and politics together, there's usually some form of oppression or limitation of freedom to those who believe and follow the way, truth, and life of Christ. And in places that are prosperous and materialistic, there very often is oppression and resistance and pushback against the ways of Christ that he would have us, his people, to follow. So we can gain encouragement from this, just as the first readers of this letter gained encouragement in their time of trial and tribulation. Even so come, Lord Jesus. Till next time, that's what I have for you today. God bless.